My mother tells me that on the day that I was due to be born, and she speaks of how, because of her involvement in politics, she was well known by the police. And she says the policemen were pointing at her, saying to her, "You're going to give birth to a terrorist. You are carrying a terrorist."
Wow.
August 2014, I dropped out. My confidence was on the floor, my self-esteem. A year later, August 2015, I'm standing on a world stage, Mel.
So today on Catalyst Conversations, I'm very excited about you being here. I call you Spiri because we have a deeper connection. We'll talk about that a little later.
Yeah.
But Zoya Mabuto Mokoditoa.
Yes.
I met you as Zoya Mabuto. We'll talk about the double barrel a little later on because that's also very fascinating to me. But welcome to Catalyst Conversations, and it's such a pleasure to have you on the seat today.
Thank you, Mel, a.k.a. Spiri.
Spiri.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Now, I'm excited because I've been, wanting to talk to you for a long time. And this conversation is one that transcends careers and our chosen paths, but also womanhood.
Yes.
And when you came in here, we'll talk about your accolades and the titles and the many hats you have. But they always say image speaks for you before you do, the way you look.
Yes.
Tell us about the hashtag Power Women you have on your chest. I saw that. I'm like, this we must delve into.
So when I was thinking about how I want to show up to our conversation, to the session, I thought, what best captures who I am, what I do and why I do it. And so I took out a whole host of outfits, as we do. Will do.
Yeah.
And I think as I sort of looked at the various outfits, this one jumped out as the one that I felt would best capture who Zoya is. So hashtag Power Woman, incidentally, is a project I ran a couple of years back. And it was a project intended to... what's the word? To celebrate, to remember, to make visible women who historically had contributed to shaping not just the African continent, but the world at large. And so on the back of this T-shirt are actually names of women. And we did, the series called hashtag Power Women because I said, I think it's important that we make visible the contributions of African women who've come before us and that we're able to call out their names. So, I don't even remember what I'm wearing on this, but I think it might be Ya Asantewa from the Gold Coast, which is now known as Ghana.
Yes.
I think also on my back is Sophia Williams de Bruyn, who was part of the 1956 Women's March to the Union Buildings, and she was the youngest leader, of that group. So I've got a couple of names on the back here. And the intent is to say, how do we not just know that prolific women came before us and contributed to where we find ourselves, but that we actually know their stories. And so if I link it to myself, I'm a storyteller, I'm a story listener, and hashtag Power Woman was a storytelling series that we worked on as a team. I work with a team back at Zoya Speaks, and I suppose we'll delve into that a bit later. So that was part of that.
Yeah.
And I think I also couldn't leave the African pendant behind it. This was gifted as a friend, actually, who'd bought it for me somewhere on her travels in Africa. And she said, when I saw this, it immediately kind of screamed Zoya. One, because gold, and two, because I love the African continent. I see the African continent as gold. And so I have a deep-rooted passion and love for the African continent, and put together with that is the work I do around women empowerment and certainly around our collective stories as women.
You say Africa is gold, and I agree with you entirely, in its people, in its culture, in its richness, not only in resources, but the essence, and that's why the word Ubuntu is one that resonates so deeply with the continent. But let's track back. Can you tell us a bit about your family life? We want to know Zoya and the family background, and, just when she started out as a little girl, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. What were her dreams? Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. We started this podcast to build a thriving community of change makers, business owners, entrepreneurs just like yourself. We want to share your stories and inspire others. But we can't do it alone. We need you to be part of the movement. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you know when the new episode drops. The more you watch, share, and connect with our content, the bigger our community grows. And when we grow, so do the opportunities for us to learn, grow, and thrive.
Sure. So I'll take it back to before I even came into the world and the story I was told about how I came into the world. And I'm going to try and keep it concise, but my mother tells me that on the day that I was due to be born, the Eastern Cape had bus boycotts. So there were bus boycotts in the Eastern Cape, and she tells the experience of how she felt that she was about to go into labor, and she was looking for transport to move from Danzane, the township, which is where we were staying, to get to the hospital, which was in the suburbs at Down. And she speaks of how, because of her involvement in politics, she was well known by the police. And in fact, our home, the home I was going to be born into, was an interesting home because it was this mix between a religious setup. My grandfather was an archdeacon in the Anglican church. And so they had this, the church home.
Yeah.
And in that same church home, they used to, hide politicians in the church vestry. And so there's this context of a home that's very political, but it's interwoven with religion. And so she speaks about how she had to find a way to get to the hospital to give birth to me. And she says on her way there, obviously she struggled to get transport, and she walked a significant, stretch. She says she walked, quite a number of kilometers to eventually get to the hospital. And she says significant things were happening on her way there. She says the policemen were pointing at her, saying to her, "You're going to give birth to a terrorist. You are carrying a terrorist."
Wow.
That's the one. And then eventually she says she gets to the hospital, and the name that's implanted in her mind, in her heart, in her soul to give to me is the name Zoya. Oh, Zoya, she will go.
Wow.
And so for her, she says it was part speaking into my life and the things I would do in my life. But specifically for her, she says it was about the story of her brother, who many years ago had left home unexpectedly, and later it was discovered that he went to exile in Botswana. And so she said that with my birth, there was the signaling of kind of a change in times and the hope for a different kind of future, because she said, you came into the world and I said you will go to bring those people who've been exiled back home. That's deep.
That is deep indeed.
And so, I mean, my mother is heavily involved in politics at the time of my birth. And so I end up being raised by my grandfather and grandmother. I'm raised in this home. We're at the church, the Anglican church to be specific. And I remember expansiveness. When I think about, growing up, I don't think about contained or small. It was big. The yard was huge. It was expansive because it was the home. It was the church or the mission house, the church, and then there was like a little creche as well. So I had this huge playground.
Wow.
That's what I remember when I think back. And we loved playing in that space. It was expansive. It was big. But alongside that were some very interesting dynamics. My uncle, my mother's brother, who came after my mom, so born after my mother, he had a son. And his son was born 2 months after I was born. And it had such a significant impact because he also came to stay in the same home. And so I grew up with this brother, because we didn't differentiate then. It's not your cousin, brother, it's your brother.
It's your brother, period.
So I grew up with my brother in this home. We're born 2 months apart, and I've always felt like that 2 months made a world of difference in terms of just how life was for us. I always had the sense that my grandfather would have wished that he came first. He would be the first born grandchild.
Right.
He was the boy. And so it played out in so many different ways, this idea that he may have wished that he'd been born before me. But here I was, the firstborn grandchild to a mother who was rebellious in many respects. And I think this was the beginnings of shaping the activist Zoya, the independent Zoya, the sometimes fierce Zoya.
Right.
The Zoya, I think, who started to dream of contributing to the world. And I say this because I had some really harsh experiences growing up. And it was informed by this very interesting dynamic of the boy and the girl who are the same age, but who are also not, because the one is, 2 months older. So I had to take responsibility from a very young age. I became that person who was looking after him, incidentally. And I remember things like going to school and me being the one who would be told, go and check to see if the transport is coming, while he sat cozily waiting. Or being the one where if we had to get ready in the morning, we weren't bathing. We had a bath in the evening, and then in the morning you just kind of wipe down.
Yeah.
And so they would say to me, have you checked that your brother has finished, getting ready for school? And so this thing of having to look after others became almost embedded into who I would become, or who I was becoming. And my refuge became, very interestingly, the stage. So I go to these schools.
Yeah.
I went to my Model C school, and I remember getting cast into a school play. And I even remember the name. It was called The Peddler of Swaffham.
Very
and I was cast as a policeman. And there were very few children who looked like I did, brown-skinned children. And so here was this little brown-skinned girl cast in this play. And after each sort of, we'd roll out the play every night. So people would come to watch the play. And at the end of the play, people would come to me. There were many of us who were cast as policemen. And I had like one line in the play, you got to keep your eyes peeled or something. And I remember it because it was so significant.
Yeah.
Anyway, people would come to me afterwards and say, yo, you've got stage presence.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. You were amazing. And I thought, is it because I'm the only dark-skinned person? What are these white people on about?
Yeah.
And that make me repeat the line from the play, which is why I don't forget it.
Right.
And so there I was, this little 8-year-old repeating this line from this play because people were saying, there's something that comes alive in you when you're on a platform. And so I think it all started there, Spiri. I don't know.
And it's amazing that, you were fortunate enough to find it at that age, because I find feedback is often linked to your purpose. You sit down and you reflect and you're like, what's the one thing that I was effortlessly drawn to, or that chose me? So would you say the stage chose you?
100%. I think, and it may even have been earlier, but I think I wasn't, you're not contextualizing it in that sense at that age. You're just doing you.
Absolutely.
But upon reflection, right? I go, oh, I remember when I was 4 or 5, also being in a little, children's play at school, and also just kind of, So I think it's always just been there, and perhaps the awareness of it came too when I was 8 years old, and people were constantly asking me to do this thing on the stage, and so then I started to do it actively. I started to participate in the school plays and anything that enabled me to be on some kind of platform, making some kind of impact.
Now, you've already spoken about your grandmother and your mother, who was an activist. Throughout that era in your life, while you were still in your grandparents' house, and obviously you found the stage and your love for it, what other influences impacted who you are today?
It's so interesting, Spiri. When we talk about influence, I like to distinguish between the positive and the negative influence. Because I think all of the people in my life at the time have had an influence on who I have become. So if I think about, the positive role models or the positive influences in my life, without even thinking, my grandmother comes to the fore, my mother comes to the fore. And similarly, if I think about some of the negative influences, the men in my life, were negative influences. And I don't say this to take away from who they are or what. But I didn't feel like they were positive role models. I did grow up in a home where I witnessed firsthand physical and emotional and verbal abuse directed by the upstanding, priest towards his wife. And I must be honest, I think it has contributed as well to some of the experiences I have had as it relates to men. I remember my mother many years ago saying to me, hey, wena, wena awuzuchata wena. You're not going to get married.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to her, Aibo, why would you say something like that? And she said, because you're intense. She said, because you there's just something about you that I think can come across as quite intimidating, and particularly to gents. And then she said, and also you're overly independent. You can do it all yourself. And so I said to her, well, it would be sad that those attributes would make me less attractive to somebody who's a man. I would love to marry somebody who is, who has some kind of fierceness of her conviction. Somebody who says, I'm willing to take the helm if I need to. And perhaps in reflecting on what my mother used to say, I said, okay, perhaps there's an opportunity for me to think about what are the ways in which I can still maintain that independence, but recognize when I need to pull back or dial down a little bit. And I think that's been with growth, understanding the need for some kind of balance. But the influences in my life have been predominantly positive influences have been females. I think about my schooling years, my teachers. I went to an all-girls school. So women and powerful women have played a huge role in shaping who I've become, and certainly linking even to the work that I'm doing around women empowerment.
Yes.
So I will definitely say it's the women who have contributed positively to shaping who I've become.
It's very interesting that you then choose to take stock of both the positive and the negative. And I mean, your mother telling you, I don't think your feistiness, there's room for a man in that. But you found a man who now gave you a double-barrel surname.
Of course.
Tell me about that part of your life and that journey of your wonderful husband.
Oh, he's beautiful. I adore my husband. I think I picked him first.
Okay.
And what I mean by this is, seriously, I'd gate crashed a party. I was in Johannesburg. I was living my best life. I'd gate crashed a party, and there was this young man standing with a group of people in a circle. He was saying something, yet he had his back to me. So I was standing somewhere else. So he had his back to me, and he was talking to a group of people, and everyone was laughing.
Oh, wow.
And he was telling this animated story, and people were beside themselves with laughter.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, if there's anyone I want to go and meet, it's that one who I can't see, but who seems to be making everybody laugh.
Right.
And so I walked up to him. No, not to him. I walked up just beside him, and I stood there. And he looked and he said, "Who are you?"
He asked you that.
He said, "Who
those
are you?"
The first words.
Those are the first words. And then, "Who are you?" And imagine it though. You're standing having a conversation with your people, and the next minute you look up and there's somebody standing, a random person from nowhere.
Right.
And so for me, the response made sense. And I said, "Oh, hi."
Right. So
And it sparked a conversation from there. What I will say, in terms of our relationship and what makes it so special, he's incredibly grounded in who he is. He's incredibly grounded in who he is. And I think what that does is to not create a situation where I ever feel like I have to diminish or reduce who I am. And so there's a wonderful kind of synergy where we can both be who we are fully and let that be part of our love story. We've always been clear from the get-go that our love story is about building together. And so he used to say to me, that what he found attractive about me was my willingness to do this with him together, to build with him. And we just were able to get along. He's a writer. And so that was something we had in common from the get-go. And he'd write beautiful emails. I refused to give him my number. Don't ask. I don't know why. And I gave him my email address. I'm a nerd like that.
You gave him your email address.
I gave him my email address.
But he sent you an email. You responded, it's like, let's do this. Courtship
and so
by
for the
email.
longest time, we were writing to each other.
Oh, wow.
And he wrote incredibly well. And so I was able to pick up. He's a thinker. He's unconventional in his thinking. He takes time with things. He's gentle. And all of that I picked up in this exchange of email conversations. Right. I was learning who he is through that process of exchanging emails and writing. Writing requires thought. Writing requires time. And especially when you're writing with care.
Absolutely.
And so those were some of the ways in which I came to better understand and learn who he is. So fast forward to today. And, we've navigated our challenges, like any relationship. Absolutely. We've been through the worst of times. We've also been through the best of times. And He really is. He is dear to my heart. I adore my husband, and I adore being married to my husband. I love being married. Interesting for the girl who was told, "Wena."
Never.
I'm not sure.
Never. Sure.
Oh, no. I mean, we call ourselves #Team Mokoditoa.
Yes, I see that a lot.
And that's the double barrel.
Yeah.
You know, but I wasn't going to lose the Mabuto, just to answer your question about the double barrel.
Right.
And I made this known to him. I said, I'm not going to lose Mabuto. I'm going to retain Mabuto,
right.
but I'm going to give you the grace and honor of putting the double barrel in recognition of the fact that this is the world we occupy. You know, one can't pretend that we're not living in a world that has certain expectations of women, in a world that's biased in terms of what it expects us to give up as women. And so I said, I will honor you, but I'm not leaving myself behind.
Right.
No.
That to me is fascinating, that you have a man that has enough sense to say, I'll accept all of who you are, and you're going to accept all of who I am, and 100%. We're going to build. What is it that Team Mokoditoa is building? I mean, I have spoken to people from various backgrounds, and they have different interpretations of what they want as a unit, as a family. What's that vision for you as Team Mokoditoa?
Whew, that's a big question, but it's one that we talk about often. In our home, Mel, and you've come to our home.
Yes, I have numerous times.
And one of the times when you came to our home, you said, at some point, the children started to come around me after, we'd been chilling or whatever, and then the children started to come around, sort of buzzing, hey, mommy. Yes. And then my husband started to do the same thing.
Yeah.
We value time together. We know that the quality of the relationships that we have amongst ourselves is also dependent on the time that we give to each other and spend with each other. And so time is important. And the spending of the time together for us is literally tantamount to investing in quality relationship. And so time is important, and we know it's linked to building the quality of relationships that we want with each other. We have meetings in that family where people are afforded the opportunity to voice when they want to engage with something. So we're also building a home where we acknowledge that everyone has something of value to contribute. Everyone. And so it is not uncommon for you to hear the sisters fighting, and then Kizzle, who's the 8-year-old feisty one, saying, Mommy, Daddy, yes. I'd like a meeting, please. And often I will say to her, what is this meeting about? And Kizzle will say so. She will say, look, there's something we need to just talk about. Myself and Sadie are not on good terms. We're fighting a lot, and it's because Sadie does X, Y, Z. Sometimes Sadie will call the meeting. Sometimes I will call the meeting. And so everyone has something of value to contribute, is something that we're instilling in them, embedding into who they are. And we live it out practically, because we know that the world already is going to tell them that because you are, you're a black girl, you're black, you're a girl, it's going to challenge them in so many ways. And then I think, my husband will always say, when my girls are doing something as menial as closing a curtain, he will say, you didn't do that with love.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And so we're mindful about the language we use to correct even behaviors. There's a mindfulness and an intentionalness about how we do things. And I think it's driven by love. My children understand that our home is a place of refuge and safety and love. And I think what we're cultivating when it comes to the core is a place where those children don't ever question or doubt that they're enough and that they are loved. So Kizzle will look at the curtain and she'll go, because she's done a shoddy job. And she goes back and she does it with care, because for us, love translates to care.
Absolutely.
Doing things with care for one another.
That's beautiful to me, because I think a great deal of us in our age group grew up totally differently to how we're showing up as parents today. You only spoke when spoken to. You were not allowed to express yourself. And you find that's why we pay thousands upon thousands and shrink fees a little later, because we're not allowed a platform to be totally ourselves. So that's admirable.
Thank you,
So
Spirit.
I met you in the Toastmasters community, and I remember you were pregnant with Kizzles, and I was doing my first speech. For those that don't know, Toastmasters is leadership in competent communication space, international. And there you were. I'm like, how does she do it? You were fully pregnant, and you gave a speech. I don't remember the title. What I do remember is your confidence, your conviction, and your intentionality in the speech. And my biggest takeaway, because I was doing my first speech, was to own the stage like God himself sent me. Now, why did you go into the Toastmaster stage? And how has it impacted who you are and how you show up in the different work circles that you do?
So Toastmasters, interestingly, has actually been in my life prior to me joining it formally as an adult. So sort of high school years, I was doing debating and public speaking. And so this has always kind of been part of that story of earlier, of the stages and speaking and engaging from the platform. And then when I left high school, I was this very burdened young girl. I felt like the world was on my shoulders and the expectations were just heavy. And so through my varsity years, I made the commitment that I would not stand on any stage. I wasn't going to stand on a stage. I didn't want anybody telling me to stand on a stage. I didn't want to speak about anything. I just wanted to have fun.
Yeah.
And so varsity years, I kind of go, I'm not doing anything that requires me to stand on a platform. I just want to live my best life and have fun with friends.
Yeah.
And so I then go into corporate. And I remember sort of being in corporate and doing this corporate thing. I was clear from the get-go for some reason that, I don't know, it's just not my space. But I persisted for a host of reasons. Persisted in the corporate world. And then in the year 2012, I was starting to get incredibly restless in corporate. And I was asking hard questions like, who am I? And who do I want to become? And I just remember starting to feel quite anxious about this corporate world not panning out in the ways that I'd hoped. I was struggling to climb that proverbial ladder. Yeah. And yet, all the evidence pointed to somebody who I wasn't just born with a gift of the gab. I also make sense when I talk.
Absolutely.
And so the corporate world was just not... It wasn't aligning to this vision or this perception I had of who I am or who I was. And I was going, but people are climbing that corporate ladder. Why am I struggling? And so I joined Toastmasters for the first time in 2012. And this is because somebody said to me, come with me to a Toastmasters meeting. And I said, Toastmasters again, I don't want. And my friend Iggy said, you're coming to Toastmasters. I think there's something there. I used to travel with Iggy in his car. He'd give me a lift on the way to work and drop me off halfway.
Yeah.
And so Iggy and I would have conversations in the morning and said, no, man, you've got to take this thing you've got and take it to Toastmasters. And so I eventually followed Iggy to Toastmasters one evening, and I thought, okay, maybe it's calling me back again. But it wasn't a formal or serious thing for me until the year 2014. And this is when I dropped out of corporate. I call myself a corporate dropout, Mel, because I dropped out of corporate without a backup plan. I just knew that the corporate world was not serving me. It wasn't working out. You know, I had been going around in circles. I wasn't making those promotions. I wasn't realizing my potential. I mean, I hate the word potential even because I'd hear it so many times. I'd be called into offices and they'd say to me, oh, Zoya, you've got so much potential. And I'd be screaming,
that word
you know what I
again.
mean? I don't want to hear that word again.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't translate into growth in the space. And so 2014, I dropped out of corporate. And without a backup plan, I made the decision that I'm going to become a champion in that Toastmasters thing. It's my exit plan.
Wow.
It's my exit strategy to deal with the fact that I have no plan except to lean on the one thing I know how to do well. And so 2014, I set the goal in August. And I said, I'm going to become the Southern African public speaking champion. And I set about doing whatever I needed to do to ensure that became a reality. That dream was going to become a reality. I dreamed the dream in 2014, August, September. August, I drop out. Early part of September, 2014, I go, I am going to become the Southern African public speaking champion. And so fast forward to the year 2015, you know, I join. I enter the contest and it's round 1, tick, round 2, tick, round 3, tick, round 4, tick. And it was interesting. Just before the district final, one of the senior leaders in Toastmasters came to me at the end of the division contest. It's the club contest, area contest, division contest. Division is just before the big one. And he comes to me and he says to me, look, Zoya, your speech is wonderful, but I don't think it's going to make it. And I go, And all of my fears and my vulnerabilities and all of those things come to the fore. And it was Balikani, my husband, who said to me, let's just steady ourselves here. Are you telling me that after all of this, you're going to let that one person stand in the way of what you dreamed for yourself? And he has the habit of being that person in my life when I need it most.
Sounding board.
And so he was absolutely incredible. And he said, we're doing this. You're telling me that we've walked this far for you to tell me that now you're feeling scared. He said, feel scared, it's okay, but we're pushing ahead, And so I then go on to district final, and I can tell you, by the time I was, my name was called up, Mel, I had won. I didn't win after or when they were going to make announcements. I had won as I was walking up that stage, ready to go deliver my speech. And so, after that, I think that was when I really said, perhaps this is actually going to be what I do. And I think for me, the biggest thing was seeing how so much can change in a year. August 2014, I dropped out. My confidence was on the floor, my self-esteem. I felt I'd lost my voice, to be honest with you. If I were to kind of encapsulate it, I'd forgotten who Zoya is, I'd lost my voice. A year later, August 2015, I'm standing on a world stage, Mel. And they were saying to me, you're representing the country and the continent at the World Champs of Speaking. Come on. And so much can change in a year. But additional to that, so much can change when you go, who am I? And what am I being called to do, actually? And I think for me, this was the confirmation that I was in alignment.
So who are you, Zoya? I see you have something to break this down to us, if you could share.
This is I brought this along, actually, because I wrote this a couple of years back. And I thought I'd share it because it has resonance. I framed it. So I wrote this when I was 17. I used to work at a biltong wagon in the mall.
Oh, lovely.
And I wrote this on a random quiet Sunday. As people were kind of walking up and down the mall, it was quiet. And I titled it Me. And so I'm going to read it because I think, it's interesting. So it reads, far off in the misty view lies an African beauty, a jewel in the gold miner's hand, a Nubian queen. Proud in her walk, swift in her turns as she moves her uniquely African curvaceous body to the drumbeat of the Ndlovu clan. A warrior on a predetermined path, fighting evil, encompassing good. Taller than any Western building, she stands out in a crowd, pitch black, turban wound, button eyes, long goddess-like hair, sole survivor pride of Africa. Her skin, soft, supple and dusty brown, not doing everything, but doing something, being only herself. No mask to cover such diversity, complexity, simplicity, no task too heavy, no dream unattained. The epitome of a warrior, a deep feeler, a perseverer, a simple thinker, a grower, someone needed, that's me. And so I wrote this when I was 17.
Wow. 17 years old.
I was sitting at the
biltong wagon. And you were already
wagon.
Articulate, you knew who you were, and you were going to honor yourself in such a grand way. That's beautiful.
So, I mean, if you ask me, so who is Zoya? I mean, I could add a couple more adjectives to that, but I think this is part description. I fight for that which is good. I'm grounded in who I am and give reverence to, my lineage as uMaNdlovu. I talk about it here. I say I'm from the Ndlovu clan. It's a huge part of who I am. When we talk about uMaNdlovu, we say singozidle ekhaya ngokusela umalusi, which means that the elephant grazes in the backyard because it does not need a shepherd. And so
that is poetic.
It is incredibly poetic. So
100%.
So I have deep reverence for my lineage and acknowledge that I am because so many others came before. I am passionate about the African continent. You will see here that Africa comes up quite a bit as well. And I've always had this interesting love for the African continent. I remember writing a speech many years back after Thabo Mbeki had introduced the concept of the African Renaissance all those years back, and really kind of being able to, buy into that and advocating for the African Renaissance. And I still think I do. And so I have this love for Africa. I'm a scout, Mel. I show up to the world with curiosity, eyes wide open. I'm curious about people. I'm curious about why things happen the way they do. So I'm always asking questions. And I think one of the questions that guide who I am and how I show up is the question, is there another way? And I think I show up to the world with that curiosity. Just because it's been done that way doesn't mean it's the only way.
Absolutely.
Is there another way? So I'm curious. I'm deeply intentional, as you know, I think.
100%.
I'm intentional about how I do things. Even with a level of spontaneity. I tend to be somebody who's quite intentional about how she does things. I love women. Hey, I love women.
Yes.
Women are beautiful.
That you do.
Hey, women are beautiful.
Loudly, proudly,
oh, I love
intentionally.
women.
Absolutely.
I love women.
Yeah.
In another life, I said to my husband, yeah, no, I'm clear.
Yeah.
I'd be a lover of women.
Right.
Yeah, no.
And I agree with, and I can attest to that. Because although a great deal of what you do is geared towards women, I've even picked up that men, especially in the Toastmaster circles, would also take a leaf or 5 out of your book. And for me, it's just a testament to your essence. And I'll tell you why.
Mel.
You were raised by a very strong woman who was very sound about who she is. And she was raised equally by a woman who also was of the same cloth or cut from the same cloth. And your life's work, and you have girl children as well. But it's such a beautiful thing when your intent is one, but it blesses another. What do you find in your path and your journey has been a beautiful revelation of your purpose? You have a solid purpose, you know what that is. But as you sojourned through your life's work, there's, other layers of purpose. Oh, by default, It's such a wonderful thing. What do you think, or what have you found accidentally was part or interwoven into your purpose? That was a wonderful surprise for you.
I mean, a story comes to mind. It's a beautiful question, and thank you for the beautiful things you say about me.
They're all true.
You're generous by nature. I say this to you all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm also just, thank you.
Thank you.
So a story comes to mind, and this was the year 2016. So I've dropped out of corporate. All of that wonderful sort of hoo-ha about being a Southern African champion has also started to die down as 2016, and I'm pregnant with my second child.
Kizzle.
And I don't have a job. I don't have a job. I was a champion and I carried that wonderful trophy, and I went to the US to represent the country and continent. I didn't place. And I come back home and there's a hoo-ha for a little bit and it dies down, as these things do. And so I fell pregnant in 2016. And it's a testing time in our marriage. It's a testing time in my life. I remember, Spiri, I didn't even have medical aid. And I remember falling pregnant and going, oh my word. But now I came from a background that was relatively stable, even financially. And so, Spiri, I'd never experienced a public hospital. And here I was confronted with the reality of having to, seriously go to a public hospital to give birth to this child. Now, to give you context, I gave birth to my first child at Morningside Hospital. And so now I have to embrace the possibility of having to go to a public facility. I research all the facilities and I end up opting for Rahima Musa, hospital. Public hospital, but specifically they focus on maternity, postnatal, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And so I think to myself, look, this is probably the best bet amongst the many. Whoo, what an experience, Beer. And particularly as a first timer.
Yeah.
I was traumatized, for lack of a better word. And I remember arriving there with my bag to go give birth to my child, and a couple of things happening. The first is, when you do that admissions process, you're all kind of sitting in the admissions or pre-admissions ward, where you need to be admitted, and then somebody will come and escort you and take you to the actual wards. A woman gave birth to a child who died there, et cetera, as we're all waiting. And so the realities of, the difference between, the experience of privilege And the opposite of that, not having privilege, just it hit me so hard. I cannot tell you, Spiri. But what happened in all of this, Spiri, it was a new world. It was stressful.
Yeah.
But what happened in all of this, Spiri, is I was able to use the power of the one thing I know how to use, Spiri.
Yep.
Spiri, I sat there engaging with those sisters to the point where by the time I was admitted, the sisters were carrying my bags for me.
VIP treatment in a public hospital.
I literally had this VIP treatment in this public hospital. They were going, okay, no, I'll take your bag. No, I'll take your other bag.
Right.
And there I was being ushered to my ward. I'd whispered to one of them at some point that, Bega, I can't be put into the ward where there's too many people in there. And so I was ushered into, and the one had said, don't worry, I'll sort you out. And so they organized this offsite private ward, and we were 3. And I just again remember reflecting on the fact that, my golly, the one thing I know how to do well, I'd engage with them, but it isn't just about engaging to kind of BS your way through things. I think it's that ability to make people feel really seen. And I think perhaps there's something there, because I was curious about their stories, and I was saying, I feel empathy because I look at the work that you're doing here, and my heart goes out to you in the long hours. And I think just having somebody make them feel like they were heard, they were seen, they were understood, they were respected, they were valued, perhaps played out positively for me. I remember I'd been told that because I was having a second baby and this would be my second Caesar, here, you don't choose. You don't choose to have an elective Caesar here. You can go and give natural birth. Wow. And I said, I don't want to. And they said, here, you don't choose. Spiri, even that happened in the way I'd asked.
Wow.
I managed to whisper to somebody nicely, listen, I can't do this thing of waiting till we get to 10 for that baby to come. I'm sitting at 2. When they come and they measure your contractions. And I said, I'm sitting at 2 and I'm dying. And so make a plan for me, please. I don't have the strength. And I remember somebody came through and they escorted me. And some of the friends I'd befriended in the ward were like, "Hi, Bo, how are you?" I remember sitting and being wheeled off to theatre, and I was going, later, I'm going to go have my, my C-section. I'm not pushing anything,
right.
Right. And reflecting on that experience, I was like, what saved me was this gift, Spiri. What saved me was this gift. And I can't tell you the number of times the ability to connect with people and to make people feel seen, heard, valued, appreciated, acknowledged has contributed. And so I think for me, it's how the purpose continues to show up. I'm grateful that I can recognize it now. And I can go, oh, wow, what a joy it is to be able to see it play out real time.
For me, we can speak in many languages. You're Xhosa speaking, I'm a Tswana speaking woman. But the language we always understand each other with is speaking to the heart.
Of course.
It's more than just the skills of persuasive communication or strategic communication or manipulative communication, which we do as salespeople.
100%.
But I think connecting with the heart, that's something you're deliberate with, right? And it takes a level of empathy and also some emotional intelligence, because when you're sensitive and empathetic to say, I'm sitting over here, this is a 6. If I come to your side, it's a 9.
100%.
Come to my 9, I'll invite you to my 6.
Spot on.
So that's really admirable. So as you progressed in your career, what were some of the pivotal moments that defined your path to becoming a leader, but also in your ascending to be a leader, which is something I've seen you do very well, especially in your tenure as president of our club, the Social Network Toastmasters, which was the most lit club ever. And in your presidency, you lit a fire under each of our bums with absolute love and encouragement. And I think something that you contribute that was invaluable is belief in ourselves, to a point where we all did the last tier of our communication journey, CC10. CC stands for competent communicator. And it became an event. What drives that? And we all called you Mama Zoya.
I know.
Although at the time you had only 2, now you have 3.
Yes.
But we understood, appreciated your nurturing nature. Where does that come from? And what is it that you think has been a blessing to you to be a teacher, an encourager, and somebody who nourishes, sees talent, and, with absolute conviction pushes people to the absolute best?
I love you. You're asking such beautiful questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Spirit. So I think it's not possible to do that again if you're not grounded in who you are. So I think the first step is really kind of who am I, and what's the value I have to bring. I think it's a critical thing, because if you are external focused, then there's a comparison between, and I don't want that one to do better than me and all sorts of things. So it's groundedness in who you are, which is obviously going to be linked to where do I see myself, what are the things I want to invest my time in, etc., etc. That's the one part. But I think for me, the critical part that then follows that is, and I'm going to call it this now because I have the fancy language for it, but it was harnessing my feminine intelligence. And by feminine intelligence, if we unpack it, if we think about the qualities or the feminine qualities, and I'm not talking about female, I'm talking about feminine qualities. Those are the qualities of compassion and care. The feminine qualities are the qualities of it's escaping me now, but of community and collaboration. That's it. And so I think for me, it is also being a Zoya who dials in on that aspect of who she is. I am deeply in love with the feminine parts of me. I wasn't always this way, though.
Yeah.
I was a hard ass for a long time. Excuse my language.
Yeah.
Right? I was a hard ass. And I didn't have time to be looking after other people. I was pushing my own agenda.
Yeah.
So I was that at some point.
Yeah.
And then there was a switch. And I don't know if it had anything to do with me giving physical, birth to children. I don't know. But I do know that there was some kind of switch. I've always had to, similar to you, nurture and look after my younger sister. And perhaps it may have been there, but I wasn't conscious of it. But I do know that I love collaboration. I'm very clear that I don't want to go anywhere, Kelewan. I don't. I don't want to go and be a champion by myself. Do you know how lonely it is to be the only one?
Extremely.
And so I don't want to be the only one. I'm clear about that. I want to do the thing. I want to go and knock the door down because I know how to do that too. And then I want to do the work of holding that door because I know I have the strength to do it. I start to get deflated though when I'm holding the door and people have no concept that there's somebody holding a door wide open for you to come through. That's what then just brings me down. And then I hibernate and I go into a cocoon. And I'm not the version of Zoya that you've just described, incidentally. But the version of me who's in her element wants all of us to win. And I believe all of us can win because everyone has something of value to contribute. That drives what I do and how I do in every sense of the word. This shows up in the context of the Zoya Speaks business. Everyone has value to contribute. Don't tell me about being a big boss. Spirit, nature is so incredible. If you were to go and research every single animal in nature and say, what does it contribute to the ecosystem? The ant has a role to play. The snail has a role to play. The scary snake for some has a role to play. The big lion has a role to play. Everything in nature, by design, has something of value to contribute. It's when all of those things work in the ecosystem that we flourish. We flourish as people, we flourish as the world. But of course, we also know that things like capitalism and the drive for profits, et cetera, can have an impact on that. And I think that's what we're constantly sort of working with.
So, Spirit, I know that you've been a very strong advocate for women in leadership.
Yeah.
What strategies have you found most effective in empowering women, And maybe if you can give us an example of a success story that embodies that, or that demonstrates it with absolute clarity.
Woman empowerment happened to me. And what I mean by this is the more I shared my own story, the more I found women saying, I resonate with what you're saying. Please, can you help me to get to the other side? So going the woman empowerment route, I believe, had more to do with what the actual need was out there. If it was up to me, Spirit, I'd be standing up on stages speaking about the things that I love to talk about.
Right.
But the world said, nope, we need you in a particular way. Because what we're needing are people who are brave, who are bold, who are courageous, and who recognize that problems need to be solved. And so that's the first thing. And so when I do the work, I make it very practical. And my work is rooted in, personal mastery, personal development. That's the starting place for anything. I always say self-transformation precedes any kind of organizational transformation when I do work in organizations. I say until you as the individual have done that work on yourself, it becomes difficult to manage how you're going to show up in the context of a team. It becomes difficult to think about you leading an entire organization. And so the starting point, if we're talking about strategies, is really assisting people to do that work on themselves. I do I've devised something quite beautiful called the empty space. And I often say to these women, think about any space that does not have you in it as an empty space. Not to say it doesn't have other people in it. Any space that does not have you in it, from this point onwards, becomes what we call an empty space. What becomes available to you is an opportunity to think about what you then bring into that space. What of you comes with you into every single space? And I always remind them of this beautiful quote by Robert Frost, who says, something we were withholding made us weak until we realized it was ourselves. And I say, how much of that are we doing on a day-to-day basis? We're stepping into spaces, we're talking about wanting to be heard, to be seen, to contribute, to make an impact, and yet to leave the best parts of who you are at the door. And so what does it look like for you to very tangibly think about what you bring into an empty space? And then we do the work of going, okay, so what values do you espouse? Right? If we had to think of 3 traits, just 3 character traits that make up who you are, what are those? And often the tendency that I see with people is a temptation to go, I am a mother, I am a wife, and people will use their roles. And I go, I'm not looking or interested in your roles here. Your roles are insignificant to me. And in fact, don't give me insight into who you are. Take me to the qualities, that essence that you spoke about earlier.
Absolutely.
And so I typically then do a very practical exercise where I say this becomes the grounding that you do. You ground yourself in who you are. There's a wonderful clip in the movie Black Panther. And in that first fight scene, I don't know if you can recall it, but there's that first fight scene, it's beautiful. You see all the tribes there, and then you've got the waterfall and the mountains. And in that first fight scene, you've got T'Challa who's fighting against M'Baku. The 2 gents fighting. Yeah. And T'Challa is supposed to come home and become the king because his father, T'Chaka, had just died. And he comes home and he's in this battle with, M'Baku. And at some point, he looks like he's about to lose. The camera switches to the Queen Mother and she shouts the words, show him who you are!
I remember that vividly.
And literally we see this man rise to a power because he is digging from deep inside of himself, and that's the place from which your power comes from. If you're going to think about confidence as an external thing, you're missing the point. We've taught people that confidence is stand up like this.
Like a peacock.
Right?
Flex your feathers. Yeah.
Yes, flex your feathers. And I go, no, confidence is inner work. And so those are the conversations I'm having with women. I'm going, if you're going to do this thing of treating confidence as if it was some external something you put on, that's not sustainable. Because you see, now you have to fake that thing when it's a group of very high stakes stakeholders in there. Now all of a sudden you're unable to do your let me stand tall and look up and make eye contact.
Yeah.
And yet what's sustainable is to be able to go, I'm going to harness something from deep inside myself and use that to ground myself. So if I think about a particular story, and I have so many. I've had instances where we do this work and people come back and they say, my husband said they want to know who I'm seeing or who I'm contacting, who I'm engaging with because I'm changing, and so we can't continue our sessions. I've had those instances, numerous. They go, they're noticing something shift in me and it's making them uncomfortable because they're not used to the version of me that takes up space and owns space, and so we can't continue. I also have the versions who, and a recent one is a young lady I met who, her name is Tebogo, she won't mind me sharing. And she came to me and she said, I need your help. Tebogo was born with the ability to see. In her 30s, she lost her sight. And she comes to me and she says, I've lost my sight, and alongside that, I feel like I've lost who I am. I need your help. And so we worked together, and literally about 2 weeks back, she sent me a clip, and she's advocating today for people who have lost their sight, and particularly those before who had sight and whose world was completely turned upside down. She now leads with the message to say that through losing her sight, her vision has become so much clearer.
Oh, wow.
Her vision for her life, her vision in terms of her purpose, and she's out there sharing that message. So if I'm to use, an example of somebody who says, something shifted for me, thank you. And we did the work. The disclaimer, Spiri, is you got to be willing to do the work.
Absolutely.
You got to be willing to do the work.
holding the mirror to yourself and dealing with the truth.
100%.
Not what you would like to see, but the actual truth. Which brings me to another sort of life that you and I, know about through group healing. We went, and I'm not sure if I'm at liberty to say it,
Yes,
but it's
yes.
a group center of light.
Yes.
And one of the things that I learned about myself there, and you went through a similar journey. And let me start by first saying the reason I went there was I felt that there was something I couldn't articulate, neither could I contain, neither could I sort of make sense, but it was brewing. It was
there.
Present. It was violent.
100%.
And as things would work out, a friend of mine tells me about the center of light. It was not it wasn't the easiest process to go through. It peeled off the layers of things that you didn't even know were laying dormant. It challenged you to literally see yourself, literally and figuratively naked.
Yes.
And deal with the wounds, the confusion, and things that suppress you and that get you to get into your own way and also a destiny delayers of sorts.
100%.
Tell me about why you went there and what it afforded you, and that also ties back into doing the work.
And so the program that I enrolled for first, Spirit, to your point, was Turning Point. And so I came across a pamphlet as I was sitting in my boss's library. My boss had a library in his home. We'd become very close, and I happened to be sitting in his library, and I come across this very weird pink, like a dusty pink, like a terrible pink, actually.
Yeah.
Like a weird pink-looking pamphlet, and it read Turning Point. You know when the words jump out of a page because it feels like they're talking to you in that moment?
Absolutely.
They were meant for you. I literally thought, oh my word, this is before I drop out of corporate.
You were still in corporate.
I was
at
still
the
in
time.
corporate when I discovered this pamphlet.
That's where that thing was brewing.
Beggar?
Something's not aligning.
Something was, and it had been brewing because I was going, I don't recognize the version of who I'm becoming here. I don't recognize her anymore. And so something's got to change. I see this pamphlet there. I don't steal. I stole that pamphlet that day. I folded it nicely and I said, I'm taking this pamphlet with me home.
Yeah.
Because that pamphlet was meant for me in that moment.
Speaking to you.
It was speaking to me. So I took that pamphlet from my boss's library, I folded it nicely, I took it home and I said, I'm going to contact these people. And so I reached out to them, and it was in 2013. Was it 2013 when I first enrolled? And it was because that something that you're speaking about was brewing. Something was brewing. I was restless, Spirit. I was restless and I was going, something's got to shift. And the words turning point, the specific words said, I need to have a turning point moment, and I think this is the time. And so, as you know, we went through, it was grueling, Spirit. You describe it, in very, in euphemistic terms.
Yeah.
Spirit, it was grueling. Because the work of peeling off the layers, think about it. If you're peeling off the layers from something, that is deeply painful.
And raw.
It is raw. And it is sore. And so what that place afforded me was a rebirth. That's what it did. It was absolutely incredible. I did Turning Point, and then the second one was called Joy Spring.
Yes.
And I soldiered on, and I said I want to do the second one called Joy Spring. After Joy Spring, they said there's a third one called The Mile. But my turning point had happened and my Joy Spring had arrived. And so I didn't need to do the mile.
Same here.
There was no need.
I didn't get to the mile. There was no need.
There was no need.
There was no need.
The clarity was there, and there was no turning back for me.
What was your agreement?
I am love.
You are love indeed.
I am love, Spirit. I am love. I am love. I am love.
Yeah.
And I think it plays out in our home. It plays out in the business. I've heard people in the business say things like, we operate with such a level of kindness that they fear that the day they leave the business and go back into the real world, this would have felt like a dream that they can't get back to. And that makes me sad when people say, what you're doing here is not of the world. And I worry that perhaps it may be a little bit unrealistic sometimes because the world is so cruel and the world is so harsh. And my heart aches. So when I think about the work I do in corporates, I say to them, it's so interesting. When I reflect on the work I do building high-performance teams, I say, you call me in here and you want to pay me thousands of rands to teach you how to be kind to one another again. And that breaks my heart. But that's what it is.
You know, one of the many lessons in one of the exercises we did, and I think this was with Joy Spring, we were challenged to go out on the street and speak to a stranger and not try to comfort them, help you. And the wisdom that was imparted. It's scary going to any stranger and say, oh, hi, can I tell you my problems? This is what's happening. It was very uncomfortable. And in turn, you find a stranger being grateful that they can offer you a shoulder.
Yes.
Right? And that's what the essence of Ubuntu is. So you've also been deeply involved. You wear many hats, but in social entrepreneurship. And your ventures contribute to community development, social entrepreneurship, and addressing socio-economic challenges. What do you think is beyond, obviously the critical points like unemployment, gender-based violence? What do you think is a critical thing that we should focus? Because all these socio-economic or social ills have an avalanche effect. I'll give you an example. I feel having, lived in the township, having lived Islalini, and having lived in the burbs. So they're totally 3 different experiences. And I find that in most of these places that I've lived in, crime is often motivated by hunger, desperation, or issues at home. What do you think is the most critical thing that we are not really paying attention to that could help maybe trickle down in a positive light?
I think we're not paying attention. It's people for me, Spear. And I'll unpack this. I went to an event yesterday. It was a high-end event. I don't need to, share the detail of that. My first impression when I arrived at that event was that, hoity-toity, probably quite inauthentic, a certain segment or LSM. So very high-end. And I had my own perceptions about what that then translated to. I sat with people who materially have so much. So much that the one lady was sharing about how their last overseas holiday in France cost them over R1 million and they're a family of 3. And I sat there and I thought, oh my, What was interesting though was that as the day progressed and we got to know each other and we went past the facades and the masks and the charades, we just became human to each other and we started to share about our human lived experiences. I think I advocate for humanity. When I think about this concept of Ubuntu, for me, it extends to more than just I am because you are. It extends to everything. I am because everything is. Everything is because I am. And so I think for me it is appreciation for, and we call it systematic thinking. I see things, I see the interconnections between things. And so I think, when I get to kind of the crux of why I do what I do or who I am or what that big thing is for me, I think what would solve our problems is just that appreciation for how, whilst every single person has something of value to contribute, that's your uniqueness, your identity, your imprint in the world. It is part of an interconnected system that depends on each other for its success. I struggle with hierarchies for that reason, by the way. I struggle with hierarchies. Like why must I, because I am owner of Zoya Speaks, be better than you? How? I'm just owner of Zoya Speaks. In your own world, you are amazing in the things that have to do with you and your path, etc., etc. So, that's what I sit with. Yeah. The big question around, and it's big, Spiri. Some people will say, oh, you're an idealist. The things you wish for and dream about are impossible. I don't know that I think they're impossible. There's a wonderful lady named Margaret Wheatley. And she writes beautiful books and she introduces very interesting concepts, and I'll share 2. The first one is she talks about this idea of walking out and walking on. So the book is called Walk Out, Walk On. And the idea is that we can walk out of systems that don't make sense to us. We can walk out of oppressive systems. We can walk out of situations that don't benefit who you are, who you want to become. But she says what's important is to ask the follow-on question. So what am I walking onto? And sometimes the thing you are walking onto doesn't yet exist. And you've got to have the courage to go, I'm going to find, and this is the second concept, the island of sanity that has the people who get it so we can co-create the version of the thing that looks better. And so it's the walk out, walk on, with the realization that sometimes we may have nothing to walk onto, but we can create it. And so she says, then look for the island of sanity. Who are the people in your community, in your circle who get it? Spiri. Who gets it?
Yeah.
And how can we band together with the island of sanity, the people who get it, to be able to create that thing that we walk onto? We've got to do it together.
Together, collaboration.
Ubuntu.
Ubuntu. Now, mentorship seems to be a very huge component in your work. Why do you believe mentorship is so important in nurturing future leaders?
Because you have skills that somebody can benefit from. Because you've had experiences and you've walked a journey that somebody else can learn and use for their journey. I'm currently mentoring, and I mentor a whole host of young people, but particularly right now, I'm wrapping up a mentorship program. I've partnered with L'Oreal, UNESCO,
Lovely.
African Leadership Academy, and they have a program that's dedicated specifically to women in science. And they have a scholarship they award to young women scientists in Africa, in the region. And they call me up and they say, we'd love for you to be one of the mentors on this program. And immediately I kind of go into, me. Little old me, right?
Yeah.
And I have walked the most incredible journey learning from these young people. And one of my, mentees was recently in New York. And she was awarded, the prize, the SDG prize for the person in Africa who's come up with something innovative. She has developed a water solution to address the challenges in her country, Namibia. Water scarcity challenges, etc. And she was recognized on a global stage for the contributions she's making to her continent. And so mentorship is interesting because I believe that it's not just about me imparting. That was the one part where you have something of value to contribute to them based on your experiences. But they have something of value to contribute to you. Mentorship is two-way. And so there's richness from the experience of being with people who may be younger and present with a different way of seeing the world, who interact with the world and technology and all these things in fundamentally different ways. And so I always see mentorship as kind of a give and take on both sides. And I think mentorship is important because we cannot learn the things we have learned and not be deliberate about making sure that that knowledge is passed down. It was Mama Charlotte Manyamatlake who said, stop this spirit of kind of thinking it's all about you. It's about you in respect of you manifesting your purpose and all of that, being clear about the unique contribution that you bring. But you've got to think about how that is by design intended for you to lift as you rise. And I think mentorship feeds into that, aspect of lifting as we rise. It is necessary, it is important. And our young people are hungry for it, Spirit.
100%.
The hunger is palpable. They want to learn from the experiences that we've had.
Yeah.
What it also does is it avoids a situation where we're repeating past mistakes. Why must somebody navigate the same traps that you did when they can navigate, a very different reality because you've assisted them to almost kind of, identify where the booby traps are. They don't need to go down the same booby traps. When you've walked that road and can say, look, avoid that pitfall, avoid that booby trap over there, or perhaps think about it in a different way. And I think that's the value of mentorship. Love it completely. And I think every single person, who has had some kind of experience should be doing mentorship. We should be imparting the knowledge and then also, be open to seeing what we can learn from them. They call that reverse mentoring,
100%.
where we're learning from these young people. Because they have value to bring too.
Absolute value. I mean, I sit with interns most of the time. And in the feedback sessions, when they feel heard and they can express themselves and ideas, I'm always mind blown by the concepts, the innovation, the immediacy, and the confidence as well, right?
Yes.
So I love that concept of reverse mentoring.
You say something very critical. You said when they are given the opportunity to be heard. And sadly, what we're seeing is that our organizations in many contexts don't create opportunity for their voices to be heard. Absolutely. So I think about the number of grads that we work with who will say to me, you're asking me to dial up on my confidence and to really kind of step into the empty space, but the environment isn't conducive. So we still see a lot of corporate cultures in the main that tend to be hostile to that we're going to maintain the bureaucracy, we're going to maintain the hierarchy. And here, the person with the experience has the loudest voice in the room. And so there, when I'm in conversation with their leaders, I say to them, are you actively creating psychologically safe spaces that enable their voices to be heard? Are you aware of the many ways in which you may be, creating a culture of silence and fear? Just through very kind of, not necessarily easy to notice things. And so they'll say things to me like, what do you mean? And I'll say, are you aware that as the young person is speaking, if you come and you speak over them, you don't allow them the opportunity to finish, in that moment, you have sent a message to say that what you're contributing does not have value. And so I say, you've got to pick it up in the small things that we're doing that undermine the contributions people bring. When you say, to the young person who's raised their hand, let's hear what you've got to contribute. Absolutely. Are you listening respectfully? Or are you listening ready to give them the corporate response, etc.? Yeah. I say to them, when you ask them for feedback, you take that feedback, they've given you their thinking. They've spent time thinking about what it is that they can, offer you as you want to improve, whatever you want to improve. I said, do you take their feedback into consideration and do you get back to them about this feedback? And sometimes it is, listen, we can't action the points, but is there some kind of acknowledgement? Acknowledgement goes a long way in terms of creating cultures where people feel like they can raise their voices to contribute.
Absolutely.
So that's the biggest challenge we often see. So it's key that you say we have to be intentional about creating the space, the opportunity for people to actually step in and to contribute. Oftentimes, we're not doing that.
100%. Now, you wear, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of hats, and I think at the essence of what you do, I think you're a teacher. That's how I see you.
100%.
I see you also juggling a lot of things: community activism, social entrepreneurship, and you're also a business when all is said and done. So in this journey of entrepreneurship, what are the biggest and hardest lessons that you've learned, and which ones have taken longer than they should have to actually land?
I think the first one was that if you're moving from, and remember I said if I could stand on a platform and speak about the things I wanted to, that kind of would be what I do.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship at its crux, Biri, is about solving problems.
Absolutely.
When there is a commercial component to that, you're then solving a problem for your customer. And so I think that's the first mindset shift I needed to make. And it necessitated then that I ask hard questions about, so what is the problem that we're solving? And then to think about how to use the combination of my skills, my experiences, my natural talents to be able to then do that. That's the first. The second was I stayed in this very interesting mindset. And again, it was my husband who said, hey, I had been offered an opportunity to go and speak at my previous employer. And I remember sending the invoice and saying, this is the rate I charge. And the boss coming back saying, we're willing to pay you 50% of that. And I just remember sitting and feeling like this little girl who'd lost her voice. That corporate experience came up in my mind again. And I sat there and I thought, okay, do I say okay and just take whatever it is that he's going to give me? And my husband said to me, yeah, stop behaving like you are still employed. You're a business owner now. And you need to make that adjustment in mindset. There is a mindset shift to, I'm now running an entity that needs to grow. I'm running an entity that needs to be able to support itself and the things it needs to achieve. And so even when it comes to things like the projects you take on, how you price, those things, I struggled with all of those things for a very long time. And eventually I had to own up to the fact that I could not do it by myself. And when we started to make money as a business, I said, okay, now we need to bring in the resources to assist us to be able to run this thing. So that's the third one. The realization that you actually cannot do it all. But in the beginning you do, because you don't have money to pay anyone. And for me, I think that was the third one. So you can't do it by yourself, certainly, and particularly if you don't have the particular skill. I don't come from a financial background. And so what were the core skills I needed assistance with? I was fine in terms of kind of being able to put copy together onto a social media page to advertise what we do. I was fine in terms of being able to write down the vision and the mission and all of those things. These are things that I know how to do.
Right.
They fall within the ambit of the things I'm able to do.
Right.
Now we're talking finances and bookkeeping and all those serious things that are required to run a business.
Absolutely.
We're talking about ethics and governance and all those structures. We're talking about contracts. And so I had to say, there's legalities you need to take care of in the context of the business. The legal expertise, you can't.
Yes.
You've got to outsource that if you don't have that background. The financial expertise, outsource that if you want to build a thriving enterprise. And so I think for me, it's just been like steadily building. But one of the things that for me is so special about entrepreneurship is not just the freedom. It's the ability to fly the thing as you're building it. And I think for me, I love that. I love that I'm afforded the opportunity to actually I'm building as I'm flying.
Yeah.
And I can iterate in the moment. I can make changes. This doesn't fit in the way I thought. Let me quickly pull it out and plug something else. And formal employment doesn't always offer people the opportunity to get creative and to explore the depth of that imagination and that creativity and where they can take, their work. And business for me, offers me that. I thrive in that space where I can explore the creativity.
Yeah.
I can try things out without, the recourse for failure in entrepreneurship, depending on the stakes, is often not the same in terms of kind of, corporate again.
Yeah.
I'm not having to report into somebody who's going to say, Zoya, you should not have taken that decision.
Yeah,
and so I'm allowing myself the flexibility to really explore as we're building this thing.
The story you just shared now about pricing reminds me of a personal story where I was invited to both MC and facilitate a panel group discussion. And because it was a friend to a favor, I'm like, friend, here's my rate card. You can give me half of that as a favor. I send in my quote, 5,000 rands. I deliver the day's work. At the end of the day, I get handshakes, appreciation, kudos. The following day, I get a text from the accountant. Ms. Mosime, there's a zero missing on your quote. Please resend. She was under the impression that all I did was worth 50,000.
Yes.
When I charged 5. So the value, it should be like an exit feedback to say, you gave us 50,000 rands worth of value.
Yeah.
And also, you said to Crystal earlier, don't tell me you're doing this for free so that, no. Set your price.
Set your price.
Why is that important for people to understand and know and learn the value?
Sure. So your story reminds me of another story, and I'm going to share that and then I'll respond to the question. I had been invited to speak at a leadership development conference, and we were 3 speakers in the program. First speaker went up, 20 minutes, they delivered. Second speaker went up, 20 minutes, they delivered. I was the last speaker, went up, 20 minutes, delivered. Now I'm sitting with the lady who'd come just before me. And she says to me in a moment of, between the ladies' gossip, she says, do you know what that first speaker charged? It was in excess of 100,000 for this. Hey, I try to play cool.
Hey, man.
Right? That time, literally, I'm hyperventilating. I'm going, hey,
man, I feel it now.
But inside. Ne? And then she says, I came in at half of that.
That's still a number.
Spiri.
You're just like...
Spiri.
Oh,
I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I came in, I charged 15,000 rand.
Spiri.
The person after me charged 50,000 rand. The person, we all delivered for 20 minutes, and that other person charged just over 100,000 rand for 20 minutes. The first thing that said to me is, what? Somebody was willing to pay that? That was the first thing.
Yes.
I literally, it was mind-blowing. I was like, somebody paid that much for 20 minutes on the platform.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing. And I thought, our industry as speakers, though, isn't regulated. And so you have these very you've got big discrepancies between what people are charging. And sometimes I sit and I think to myself, come on. I think there is abuse to some extent as well, where people are going completely. It's just, it's a little bit insane. And I think it is because there's no regulation. But alongside that, it just had light bulbs were going off in my head, and I had to sit with myself and ask myself, so what is the value of what you bring? I remember, though, when I sat in that conversation with that lady, I'd done the work. I'd done the work on Zoya and understanding. And I remember thinking, I'm not sitting here going, I should also have. I said, for now, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have the years experience some of them have had, and therefore I did not have the conviction of the price I was, I would not have the conviction if I was doing it to mirror that person. And so for me, I now charge a price. I don't care who is who under the sun, Spiri. I have the conviction of why I charge the price I do. And I'm able to link it in my own mind before anybody else's to the value that I bring, to the experience I've amassed over the years, to the my IP, my intellectual property, all of those things. And so it's important that you then do the work of record your steps. Record your steps. I don't think it's fair to say step into the market as a first timer and think you're going to charge the 100K because somebody else is doing it. That's just my view. Because I think if you're doing it to go, I'm just doing it because everybody else is doing it, you sit with your own issues around being able to have the conviction of that. Whereas for me, I said, over the years, I'm putting this price up, and now there's a particular rate. I don't care if you're gasping, Spirit, and you're going, oh, it's too much. That's on you, not me.
Price.
And it's because I own it. I own it, and I'm very clear about what that entails. Similarly, people will come and say things like, oh, friend, please, can you do this for me? Spirit, my no is a very clear no. They say, oh, at no cost. I say, oh, no, I paid my school fees. I did a whole host of things. When I was starting out this business, I used to travel all around the libraries in all of Gauteng, and I was giving free talks and all sorts of things. I used to mentor people, you know. I would use my last little cent to get from one place to the next because I'm trying to invest in this thing, going to Toastmasters meetings, and the petrol money is not even there, you know. But I would make it work, and so I've given and I've given and I've given. And I'm very comfortable to say to some opportunities, you know, where people say, exposure, or please, we're to friend nothing. I say, I'm running a business here, my dear.
Yeah.
And I'm clear about that. I will make concessions, and I will say, look, I'm willing to negotiate to X amount. But this thing where, and women in particular, I've found, we struggle a little bit with this one. And I think that part of the conversations I have with the women, you know, is let's think about pricing. Let's think about the value that 100%. We bring. Let's think about how we work with the world that's going to push back against it. This Zoya, who does she think she is? But then I look at the Asian male, and he charged above 100,000. And so we also have to recognize that as females, what plays out is that bias around what we're worth, etc. If you go and you compare what female and male public speakers are making, you'd be shocked to see how the system continues to play itself out. The male public speakers are going out there, professional speakers. They're going out there and their prices are sky high. When we try to do the same thing, the world is asking us to please bend and twist and all these
it's
you know,
almost
things.
An expectation,
Almost an expectation that we must come in a little bit lower. And if we're not understanding, oh, that one is dominating, she's too much, she's intense, that one. When all you are is just a lady who says, here's my price and this is what we work with, or you can, and it's a take it or leave it attitude. So part of it is also saying, how do we inculcate this into some of the work that we do? We're excited to launch, we're launching Bua. And it's a network of women where we are literally going to just dial up on this leadership stuff and, you know, effective communication. But alongside that, bring home the realities women are experiencing on the ground. There's no outlet for it. I see it every time I join some kind of women's group. We're talking about the same things and they go, finally a place where I can breathe and actually speak truth to the experiences I'm having. The beauty about that network will be that it'll have, or it already has, this diverse group of women who come in with various skills and experiences who go, to your point, how can I use those experiences to guide you to do better or to walk the journey with less thorns or less booby traps? So Bua is a network. We haven't even launched it, but that's going to launch in a couple of months. We're looking to launch end of the year. We'd initially wanted a September launch. And Bua is that. It's going to be this collective network where we come together, and the idea is we assist you to become effective in how you communicate, to stand your ground when you need to learn the skills of persuasion, and to know it's okay to be a woman who's saying, I want to win people over in a particular way and in the business world.
Absolutely.
Women shrink themselves. And so we're trying to kind of, you know, undo some of those in an environment that's safe, etc. So Bua becomes like an empowerment home, as it were.
Now, you're in a very unique position in that you sort of bridge the divide between big business and somebody that wants to ascend, somebody that has aspirations, somebody that wants support and help. What message would you give to the two groups respectively, being the one that wants to come up, that is, you know, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but doesn't know where to start or doesn't know what kind of support to reach out to? And this one with the funds that are geared towards, quote-unquote, women development programs, that they have no sense in reality of what happens in the everyday life, in our struggles, in our desires, even in our capacity and capability, because there seems to be this boys' club-esque thing that happens, and people assuming they know what we need. So message to respective parties.
Something that somebody empowered me with, and I don't know if this responds to the question, is nothing is more empowering than knowing what is yours and what is not yours. And I'll unpack that. So when we do gender work or we do race work, etc., there is a tendency for us to want to onboard things that are systemic, that are not ours to onboard. So if we're thinking about the gender conversation, things that are systemic are the age-old patriarchy, which is fed by capitalism. And I don't want to get too technical and speak the isms.
Yeah.
But patriarchy has been around for eons, years and years and years. And it's a system that is designed on dominance of one over another. Contrary to what most people think. They think patriarchy means men are bad. There's no such thing. It's about dominance over another. So we step into a system, a world system that operates off of this patriarchy thing. We onboard patriarchy sometimes, and we want to think we want to take on the challenges of the system, and we want to make them like, oh, it's me, it's because of me. And I see it a lot. I see it happening a lot in kind of the gender conversations, where the challenges we have in the gender conversation are onboarded by women as maybe something's wrong with me, or there's something I haven't done to meet the criteria. And I go, no, it's not you, it's the system. There are things that are of the system, so understand how the system works. That's the first thing I say. Understand how the system that you're operating in works. Understand corporate culture. Understand corporate dynamics. Understand how your business, whether it's an entry-level business, your SMME business, or a very established business, understand kind of, where you fit into all of this. That's the first thing. Understand this world that you're operating in. There's a wonderful quote that goes, "Facing reality is an empowering act." Your dreams are valid. But your dreams, without contextual understanding, you're not going to be able to make that alignment. So dream the big dreams, but have a very clear sense of what's happening in and around me. So it's important. I mean, one of the things that we struggled with, initially was kind of going, this is the work that we do. This is what we do. We service certain people, and they sit in a particular place. And then we put on kind of these blinkers and we focus solely on that. It started to hurt the business. I needed to have a full understanding of how the whole corporate animal works. Absolutely. How does that whole thing work? So how does this translate to advice? Just be mindful and aware of your environment. That's the first thing. Really have a contextual understanding and appreciation. So ask the questions, get into spaces that might be unfamiliar to better understand kind of what's happening around me. It becomes critical and important relative to what you're putting out there. The second is, I think it's okay to be uncertain. Your brain is interesting in that it craves certainty. And yet business is made up of predominant uncertainty.
Absolutely.
We know this. You can move 1 month and feel like you are balling. Jonga, I can book a plane now.
Notification galore.
And be there. Notifications are just pouring in.
Yeah.
And 2 months later, there is nothing. There is nothing, Spirit, because a project you'd anticipated would work out at the last minute dropped you. That's the reality. And so we've got to become comfortable, and this is to both of them, with a certain level of uncertainty. Absolutely. In the leadership development space, we talk about a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, and we call it VUCA. And so you've always kind of got to live in a state of being able to become comfortable with the discomfort of operating in entrepreneurship. You've got to be comfortable with it. There are months where you will be bawling and you're going to be able to do the things you wish. So how do you plan then for those months that are going to be dry and tough? And so planning alongside, being comfortable in discomfort and uncertainty becomes important. I don't want to put myself out there as a master planner, but I certainly have become better because within the context of the business, I've gone, here's where we have, an ebb. Here's where we have flow. When we have flow, how do we take some of that and put that aside for the rainy days? And it's not always easy.
Yeah.
And so what does it look like to inculcate that culture? And again, it's relevant for regardless of where you are, sort of on that continuum, whether you're starting out or whether you've been in business for a long time. If we bring it to kind of the gender conversation, it's so tricky.
Oh boy.
It's so tricky, Spirit, because it's true. There are so many who are advocating for women empowerment. And it's a difficult one because we do need the funding, towards women empowerment initiatives. We do need you as women-owned businesses to be getting the funding to enable you to be able to develop your businesses. I am deliberate about who I partner with. I'm deliberate about who I do work with. I'm deliberate about the associates we bring into the business. And it has to do with that fact. There are many people who put themselves out there as advocates of. And then once you get a little bit closer, you realize that we're not speaking the same language. And so I think one must think mindfully and deliberately about the partnerships that you're investing in. I invest in partnerships for the long haul. I described it when I was talking to you about #Team Mokoditoa. And I said, I like to think of myself as a teacher, certainly, but as a builder. I like building things. And if you're thinking about building takes time. Building is kind of back and forth. I apply the same concept to the quality of relationships I like to build. I don't need to speak to you every day, Spir. But when we do connect, there's something there that's incredibly solid.
100%.
And it has to do with the quality of relationship that we've invested in building. And so I like to espouse the same thinking and idea in terms of how I do business. I am mindful about who we bring to the fold. There are people I've said yes to because we think we have a same or similar agenda. I've gone down the line to say, no, we're not together, we're not aligned. And in fact, I did that recently, where I identified that perhaps there was a misalignment in terms of our values and how we were looking at this woman development or woman empowerment thing. And I pulled the plug on that one. I said, nope, we're not going to engage. And so it is also just thinking through the partnerships that you're investing in. Yeah. I'm not even sure I answered the question.
No, you did.
But
you did. You know, it's very interesting, the dynamics and the reality of our lived experiences and how we're not having those difficult dialogue with those who need to hear it. It's all good and well, I can call you and vent, but the person that really needs to hear it, is it landing the way it should, or do we need to drag them to our 6 and 9 situation? So I appreciate that feedback.
Thank you.
Now, you are currently living, your current reality is your previous dream. What are your future plans for brand Zoya, yourself, and for Zoya Speaks, the company and the business?
So when I have children, I pull back on the individual Zoya Mabuto Mokoditoa dreams. I don't know why. I just do it. I take time out.
Yeah.
What it has afforded me is the opportunity to build Zoya Speaks gradually. And I'm talking about Zoya Speaks. I'm differentiating between Zoya Speaks, the business, and Zoya Mabuto Mokoditoa, the individual. So I build Zoya Speaks in the back end, and it's amazing, wonderful things, and there's some continuity there. When I think about the future, my last born is now going to be 3.
He's so cute.
And I normally give, he is cute. He's so
He's so
cute.
adorable.
He is adorable,
Fuzzy.
Spiri. Oh, Spiri, don't get me started on that. I mean, I'll deviate slightly. I went away on a trip.
Yeah.
A regional trip for about a week. And I come home and he sees me for the first time. He says, I've been looking for you.
Oh, no.
That's too sweet.
Oh, too
so
cute.
This poor child, for the week has kind of been roaming the house looking for his mom. Where's his woman? And so the first thing he said to me, he said, I've been looking for you.
Oh, man,
it was
that
too
is
sweet.
Too precious.
So I take the time out when I have the kids, and I normally take about 2 to 3 years. And so I pause everything on the Zoya Mabuto Mokoditoa. Zoya Mabuto Mokoditoa loves to stand on a platform and to speak. And so if we're talking about the future, that's what I'm investing in very deliberately. I do have somebody who is taking on the role of managing the brand itself, that individual brand.
Wonderful.
And we literally are going global. We're not holding back on it. We've already explored certain opportunities. It's exciting. It's regional. It's global. The speaker takes the platform in a big way. I'm not holding back. I'm not making any more children. And so I can park Mama Zoya for now and really step into the thing I love to do. And the reason I'm able to do that is because Zoya Speaks, the business, has actually grown. And so when I was sort of in the background, not standing up on stages and traveling the globe, I was able to sit back and deliberately build the Zoya Speaks business. And so we have got the Be Heard program, our flagship program.
Yes.
We're very proud of the Be Heard program. There's a network facilitator who roll out the Be Heard program. We've partnered with some really amazing partners, and we continue to have more opportunities there. So the growth of Zoya Speaks, the entity that can exist independent of me, has always been the thing I wanted to do.
Absolutely.
Where Zoya Speaks exists and I am pulling away to go, then there's Zoya Mabuto Mokoditoa. It falls under Zoya Speaks, but she's the speaker now. And so plans to sort of really step out as an individual speaker, carrying the same messages of empowerment for women, carrying the same messages of we all have something of value to contribute, but also very actively challenging the status quo. Actively kind of going, how can we be deliberate about not just speaking for the sake of speaking, but speaking to the point where I can have the kind of impact where policy can shift because I have said we need to look at this thing. There are pipelines to write books. I'm in the process of writing 2 books, a children's book.
Thank you.
I know, Spiri.
We've been waiting for that for a while.
Spiri, it's taken a while, but I'm ready now. So the first book, without giving away too much, is about the story of a girl who lost her voice. And it links to the Zoya Speaks, a young girl. And I'm writing that for a young audience to say, you're a young girl, you have value to contribute, and there is something called just finding your voice, and that's aimed at kind of really like young children, whether it's boys or girls. And so we're working on that project. It's big, Spiri, it excites me.
Yeah.
And then the second one is the leadership and effective communication one, which centers around our Be Heard program offering, the experiences we've had, the testimonials we've been able to gather. And I think this is the thing about books. I'm starting to see a trend where we're writing a lot of books, and a lot of them are really just reflections on our stories, and I think they matter. What I'm looking for us to do from the African continent is to be able to also build knowledge that can be used by other people. I want people to teach the Be Heard program in other parts of the world. And so I think for me it's taken time because I've said I want to give something to the world that can be applied by everyone in the world. And so there's been a lot of work going into creating a program that can be used across the globe. There's been a lot of work in terms of going, what's the research we need to do to really get a crystal clear picture of what we mean by being heard? If I just deviate slightly, when we did the research on the Be Heard program and we said, what does it mean to be heard? People said it's at surface level. They said to be heard for me means people can understand what I'm saying. And so it's about understanding. Then people go deeper and they go, well, actually, when people understand me, I don't know, I just feel seen. I feel valued. I feel appreciated. We've been able to make links to this concept called quiet quitting in organizations, and we're going, there's a direct link between being heard and belonging. When people are not heard in organizations, Spiri, it translates to a sense of belonging. And if you feel you have no belonging in a place, you disengage at the level of your identity. You don't make a contribution. That's the level of insight we've been able to get to doing the work, doing the research, iterating. So the book was always going to take time. Yeah. Because I think the intent has always been to say, I want to bring something to the world that is going to make a difference and that's applicable in very practical ways. So that's the second piece, really kind of continuing to grow the Be Heard program, building on the facilitator network that we have, etc., and then also launching BUA. That's a big part there. So those are some of the things that are exciting, that are happening. It's so much happening, Spiri.
It's a lot happening. And now that brings me to my following question. There's a lot of moving parts.
Yes.
How do you then track back and take rest? I mean, with me, my biggest place of rest, I battle with sleeping. I'm working on it. My sleep hygiene is not what it should be because of the things I have to do. But my rest is centered in my faith. Yes. There is no safer, much more serene, much more, just fulfilling place for me. What is that for you? How do you then pull back from your roles of being a leader, a mother, a wife, and all these balls that you're juggling all at the same time?
The first is I communicate that I cannot be the best Zoya to anyone if I'm not the best Zoya to Zoya. And so my family understand it clearly. That's an important part of it. Because if you don't manage that expectation, your children want you with them 24/7, particularly when they're still young. They want you there. And a part of them even starts to feel entitled to you and your time. And so I have sat my children down to help them understand that I was Zoya before I was Mama Zoya to them. I was Zoya before I was the wife to their father. And so there's a very clear understanding, and even my husband understands. People often marvel when I say, oh, I went on a solocation, or I went on a retreat. I do me, hey?
Yeah.
And so I think for me, if we think about the specifics of what that looks like, Spirit, I can be doing anything. In February, I went to a retreat in Durban. I love the ocean, and the ocean is my place to really recharge. Yeah. I take walks along the ocean. I meet new people. I just want to be by myself, and I can be doing whatever, Spirit. I find that there is a spiritual recharge in having that time alone. It's alone time. It's time with me and my thoughts. It's time with me and my feelings. It's time processing. It's time dreaming. It's time playing if I want to play.
Yeah.
But it is my time to do with it however I please. On my recent trip, I was there for 4 days. 2 of those days were work days, and the other 2 were my days. And when I was reflecting on what I did on those 2 days, I said it was about building connection and discovery. And so that's what I did. I was, engaging with random people on the street, just chatting about the culture. I was in Zambia, about Zambia. I was doing what I love, which is to explore. I went to visit some heritage sites, did the museums, etc. I just fed into me. I went to beautiful restaurants and enjoyed really good food by myself. When the kids are there, Spirit, we even have habits where you buy the food, the KFC, I'm not KFC, what is it? Chicken licken wings. And you quickly devour them before you get home. And then,
because they're not yours as soon as you walk in.
Because they're not yours. As soon as you walk in, people are going, what's that? What's that?
What did you bring us?
What did you bring us? And I'm going, woo. And so I didn't have to think about the next person. I could selfishly indulge me for me. And so it doesn't matter what I'm doing. It's just about carving out that time where I have my time out and having the people close enough to me who understand that mommy, wifey, friend, sister needs her time.
And it's very important pouring into self, because you show up as the best version of yourself when you're rested, when you filled your cup. And it's heartbreaking that freedom that ought not to be even an issue is something that is taken away from you, or that you feel you have to surrender as soon as your mom, as soon as your wifey, to say, hold on, you're holding me to a certain ideal where you've boxed me, but I am a person too. I am just a person, and I happen to be in your life.
100%.
So that's wonderful. That's a beautiful lesson.
It is. And it's counter the system, by the way. Because the more we do for others as women, the more you are the epitome of what a woman should be. So this thing of being a woman who leaves her children and husband to go tend to herself, my friend, is incredibly counter what is drilled into us, systemically. And remember, I said to you, you've got to distinguish between what's of the system and what's mine. And I often say to my husband, listen, we are, we're not doing what is the norm. We're deviating from the norm. And so please expect people to pull up a brow and to go, oh, so she's gone by herself. Oh, for 4 days. Doing what? And so she's left the kids. I went to walk with lions.
Oh, yes, the lion walking birds.
Did the lion walk. The comments from all the women on my timeline were, Danam, this looks amazing, but please remember you're a mother and a wife.
You have kids.
You have kids. And then others would ask, what did your husband say? They sent me private messages.
Oh, wow.
What did your husband say? Because how dare I lean into that adventurous side of me that wants to explore? I said, my husband, when I came back, he asked me how it was. And he said, sorry, love, I slept through you leaving to go to the lions. I'm hoping you had a wonderful time. I said, the world is preoccupied with this husband who was sitting pensive and stressed out by a wife who tends to herself. I said, he was sitting back home going, do you, boo? He said, love, if that makes you happy, you do you.
That's beautiful, because you build your own culture away from societal norms, right? And there's a beautiful story which is going around the socials, and it's like generations after generations, they used to cut a big piece of a tomahawk or something and put it in a pan before they put it in the oven. And then 5 generations later, one of the kiddies is like, Mom, why do you chop that thing up? It's like, no, I'm not sure. Let me call Mom. Ask Mom, why do we chop the thing up in half? Until they get to the grandmother's like, because we had small pans.
Yes.
and the piece of meat wouldn't fit in there. So we do things we adopt for generations that 100%. Don't serve us anymore.
Spot on.
That's amazing.
And what the beauty of what you're saying that links directly to the personal development work is that it's what have you adopted that you've not asked the question, where does this come from?
Exactly.
That has nothing to do with who you have become or where we are, even as a world. And that you continue to do without even understanding why you do it.
Yeah.
Most people don't even realize that you can actually let it go. So if we go back to your story, I now know that this was done because we had small pans. Yeah. Now we have bigger pans. Exactly. There's no need to continue to do it.
And to cut the meat in half and throw the half away.
It's that awareness. Yeah. It's being willing to kind of ask the questions, that curiosity. I mean, if you said to me, what's the one thing that's helped me to grow? I'm hell of a curious. I want to know why. Why that? Why not that? Yeah. What if, etc., etc. Because I think there's so much that does not need to stay the way it used to be, but that we continue to do just because it was done. In a harmful situation, it can lead us to situations where people will perpetuate something that actually does hurt them, and in the long run, they start to say things like, "What's wrong with me?" You know, I had a client who used to say that. She says, for some reason, I just wasn't fitting into the family mold. And eventually the story was, what's wrong with me? When she changed the question to what happened? Yeah. Or what happened to me? And I think Oprah wrote a book about it. What happened to me? And I'm still reading it. I haven't really gotten into it. But when you change when you reframe the situation to say what happened versus what's wrong with me, all of a sudden the picture starts to shift because you realize that you've been responding to a series of experiences, events that are happening, and there's power to change and to change how you respond.
Now, Spiri, you are a servant leader. I've seen it in your work. It's palpable.
Thank you.
And your contract is also love. What does your love mean? What does Zoya's love mean?
Spiri, that's deep. Spiri, what does my love mean? Maybe it is service, Spiri. Maybe it is. I don't know, Spiri. I think that's a big question. I think my love, very interestingly, is not a fixed kind of thing. I don't know that it's fixed. I do know that there's something that's loving about me being someone who's in perpetual discovery. Spiri, I sometimes think that I show up to the world with this childlike amazement and wonder at the world. And I think that's also part of the beautiful love story. I don't get tired of continuing to discover my husband or my children, to rediscover myself, to rediscover my friends, you, right? I think there's just something very loving about allowing ourselves to just continue to be discovering and rediscovering ourselves and each other. Because you aren't constant, you aren't fixed.
Absolutely.
You are constantly evolving and embracing. So perhaps there's something about discovery there. I don't have the perfect answer for this. There's something about discovery and how I love. I'm watching my children grow. And I'm allowing myself to embrace who they are becoming through a process of discovery and going, oh my word, who this child was when she was 4 is not the same person 2 years later at 6. She's evolved. And it's to remind myself to stay in that fascination and wonder of things as they evolve, even if they make me uncomfortable and nervous sometimes. To love, even as things become. And even as they deviate from my script, to continue to love even then. I think that's the one. The other one is acceptance. I think my love is also rooted in acceptance. I think I've come to accept the really amazing things about me. I've also come to accept the really shitty things about me. The language, no?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, express yourself.
Really,
be heard.
There are things about me. About me. I can get very impatient with myself and others. And so there are things about me. I'm also just like, I don't like that about you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's an acceptance, though, a gracious acceptance for just who I am. And I think I like to extend that as well to others. I don't want to create an environment. And people used to say this to me. They used to say, when I'm with you, I feel like I need to be uppity. And I go, accept yourself as you are, because I've already accepted you. But don't feel like you need to conform to the fact that I'm that way. That's who I am, and that's how I show up. And so I sometimes sit with this thing around, how can I create environments where people don't feel like they need to, because now Zoya's in the room. And it's a constant work in progress, because I get feedback where people say, you hold yourself to such a high standard of delivery, we get nervous, and we're like, is this going to meet her expectations?
Yeah.
And I often have to say to people, hold yourself accountable to your own standards of what excellence, etc. is. When you show up for you as a brand and you show up in the fullness of that for yourself, I promise you, I will benefit regardless.
Absolutely.
So don't show up to me to prove a point to me, to do it for me. And so I think for me, it is just an acceptance thing. There's an acceptance in this love thing, a full acceptance of who I am, and hopefully to be able to translate that into full acceptance of who other people are. We're not designed the same. And yet at the same time, if I look at you inside and I look at me inside, it's identical. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
And so I think it's acceptance.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a third, because they say things in threes.
In threes, yeah.
I'm looking for a
lesson we did,
third.
yeah.
Love is love is love. Khalil Gibran wrote that beautiful poem about love. I used to know it off by heart. I don't remember it anymore. But love gives unto love. Just love. You know. Kindness. I think kindness is underrated. Just the act of being kind.
100%.
I love acts of kindness. I gravitate towards people who are kind to me. I've never jollied with those types who are unkind to people. Because I'm so nervous of it. No, seriously, I was thinking about it. I love to be loved.
Yeah.
As much as I love to give love, I love to be loved. And the other day I was thinking, in my jollaring track record, I've only ever dated people who are like, I'm just here to love you.
Right.
I love
that's what you
to be
respond
loved.
to,
And I respond to love. I struggle when people say things like, you had to beat me in order for the point, or you had to speak unkind to me. I don't know that I would even be able to be in a relationship that operates in that way. Even across friendships. I love love. And I love to be loved. I do. I really do.
Yeah. Spiri, in closing, you and I could talk for hours on end. It's a pity we don't have the time. But what is it that you would say to somebody that's watching this, somebody that resonates with this interview, somebody that is maybe someone like your younger self or even your daughters, but thinking, my, this makes sense to me. I can do it. If she can do it, if she did the things that she did with her story and how she came through and overcame, what is your biggest call to action to the person that's watching this and that's yearning to perhaps be where you are or somewhere else and just ascend in life?
So first of all, I'm a human being just like you. And so resist the urge to put me on a pedestal. Because you may want to do that, thinking that there was some superhero potion I drank that gave me wings to fly. I'm no superhero by any stretch of the imagination in the kind of superhero sense. I'm a superhero because I continue to navigate challenges every single day.
Every day.
And I try to find ways to kind of overcome the challenges using the resources available to me at any given time. And so I'm not going to paint a picture of the world is dreamy and you can get everything you want. You can get everything you want, but you will have to cross through hurdles that will take you to a place where the very essence of who you are is tested. That's the way this thing works. Treat those challenges as learning opportunities. In the moment, you're not going to be able to do that. And so become a person who gets into the habit of pausing and reflecting on the experiences you've had, because that's where you see, here, I was just being stretched to grow. So in the moment, it's going to be tough and it's going to feel like it'll never end. But in that moment is where you dig deep and you say, who am I? And you go, I'm going to show myself and them who I am.
Yeah.
So life is that. It's a series of ups and downs. Celebrate the moments where you do well. Celebrate those. Revel in yourself. They'll tell you you're bragging or they'll tell you think whatever. It doesn't matter. Learn to celebrate and revel those ups. And when you hit those downs, understand that it's transitionary. In the same way that the ups, you don't stay on a mountain top forever. You'd freeze to death and die.
Yeah.
And so you don't even want to.
That's true.
And so enable yourself the opportunity to actually even just go through the discomfort, knowing that you will come out of it. When you are out of it, pause and reflect, because you will realize that something was being molded that is big, that sits inside of you. And I think that's it. It's really to say, let's be real about the fact that this world is what it is. But we can, overcome those obstacles. I always talk about community spirit. Don't try and do it alone.
Absolutely.
Don't try and do it alone. Whatever is available to you, surround yourself with that, network of people who care for you and who are invested in you and who can assist you as you navigate some of these challenging times. The community I have is everything. Absolutely everything. I can be absolutely incredible because I have a makeup artist who ensures that when I come here, they put the makeup on my face and they do the things. I have somebody who will say, I'll assist with styling, and they will assist me sometimes too. I have somebody who says, I'll schedule your meetings, and they assist in that respect too. I have people who are fully invested. Some of them get paid, some don't, who are fully invested in seeing me become the best version of myself. I've also had to let people go. A friend of mine, Helen Nicholson, really lovely lady, talks about how she has and again, excuse my crude, it's her language, not mine.
Yeah.
She has a fuck-off list. And the fuck-off list is where she's said, look, I've tried here, and it's not working. And so she has a list of people where she's gone, look, I've put you on the fuck-off list, excuse my language again. But there is merit in understanding what you're no longer willing to tolerate in your space, and particularly if you're saying, I want to create a space that looks this particular way. And you have people who are intent on not, contributing in ways that make sense to that, who are constantly wanting to strip or take away from that. And so we have to do the work of letting go sometimes, 100%. Painful as it may be. I don't want to go on too much. I think let's leave it there.
We can go on.
I think let's
we'll
leave
do a part
it there.
2 episode if we go
my.
on. But Spirit, thank you so much for who you are, for what you do, and the level of conviction of doing it. I see you live your life with absolute intentionality, with drive, and also with a lot of consideration. You're a trailblazer, and your level of empathy also shows in your work.
Thank
you. I know
you.
you're passionate about imparting all that you have learned and, lifting as you rise.
Thank you.
And thank you for being a catalyst.
Thank you, Spiri.
Thank you for coming onto the show. This is exciting.
Spiri! You didn't talk about why we call each other Spiri.
Yes,
Maybe close it off.
Yes, close it off
Let's
with that.
close it off with that. So Spiri and I were in Toastmasters together, and we'd have these deep conversations about very deep things.
Yeah.
We realized at some point that we'd walked a similar journey in respect of the turning point stuff, etc. And I think we said, man, we are spirit sisters.
Yeah,
I would say something, you'd go, I was thinking that.
Exactly,
You would say something and I would say,
100%.
Spiri, you won't believe it. But I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And so I think we then from there were able to go, I said, we're spirit sisters. And then because Gewena, you zhoosh things up, you were like, we're going to call each other Spiri.
I remember we went to a similar event. It was a big hall with round tables. And I think I looked onto my periphery, and at the corner of my eye, there you are. And I said under my breath, and I think you were 5 tables away.
Yes.
And yo, Spirit. And as soon as I said it, you looked
I looked
my way.
back.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's my spirit sister.
And that's what it is, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, my sis, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, my
again.
sis.